All right, guys, so we're gonna look at our second comma rule. For this comma rule, I'm actually gonna break this video into two separate videos for a couple of reasons. One, because I'm running out of board space here. And two, probably the biggest reason is because the information on this video is gonna be important with another comma rule we're gonna look at later. And it's also gonna be important when we start looking at sentence types. All right, so you will wanna come back to this video again, so I'm just gonna put it off on its own. All right, so again, we're looking how we can use commas correctly to indicate pauses in our writing. Before we get started, I just want you to look. I have listed out some clauses for you. We have at the fountain, he cried. To the dorm, she tried to say goodbye, and never too late. What I'd like for you to do first is in your notebook, I want you to record these sentences, and I want you to tell me which ones you think are a complete sentence, all right? You can do that by just putting a check mark next to whichever ones you think are complete sentences. Now, once you've done that, we're actually going to look at what makes a complete sentence, which is going to be an important part of understanding our second comma rule. So for comma rule number 2, use a comma to separate independent clauses joined together by a coordinating conjunction. Okay? Those are some big words. Don't get lost in the verbiage, okay? But it is going to be important for you to know the difference in an independent clause and a dependent clause in order to use this comma correctly. All right? So we're going to start by looking at what is an independent clause and what is a dependent clause. So for an independent clause, that is where you have a subject and a predicate. Now, to simplify that a little bit, you're going to have a noun doing an action or doing a verb. And then you might have some additional information stating something about the subject. All right? So for example, an independent clause could be Heather tried. Heather is my noun. It is my subject of the sentence. And then what did Heather do? She tried. So this is your predicate. Okay? So I have a complete thought here. So again, if you get really confused with the words subject and predicate and you're not sure if it's an independent clause, ask yourself these two questions. Can it stand alone and is it a complete thought? Does it make sense? If I say Heather tried, that is an independent clause because it can stand on its own. It makes sense. There is a subject and there is an action tied to that, okay? If a clause is dependent, that means it's only going to have part of what you have to have a complete thought. It's either going to have a subject or it's going to have a predicate. It'll either have a noun or it'll have something about it, but they're not together, okay? This can't stand on its own. And it's not a complete thought. Essentially, it doesn't really make sense by itself. So let's go back and look at those sample phrases that we wrote down. We're going to see if we can determine if they're independent or dependent. So let's look at the fountain. Do we know who's at the fountain? Do we know what they did at the fountain? Therefore, this is a dependent clause. He cried. We know the subject of our sentence is he, and we know what he did. He cried. Now, we don't know any other additional information, like why he cried or what made him cry, but we know the subject and the predicate. We know who is our subject and what they did. So this is an example of an independent clause, okay? To the dorm. Do we know who went to the dorm? How they went to the dorm? Why they went to the dorm? No, so therefore this is a dependent clause. She tried to say goodbye. Well, we know we have a subject. What is the action of our subject? Tried is our verb, that's our action. And then we have a complete thought to say goodbye. So we have a independent clause here. Never too late. Well, we have a predicate, we have an action. Something's never too late, but we don't know what. The game is never too late. It is never too late. The assignment is never too late. So this is a dependent clause. So, just a quick recap. The first part of this comma rule, you have to be able to tell me the difference in an independent and a dependent clause, because with this comma rule, you're going to be bringing together independent clauses by coordinating conjunctions. Therefore, if they're not independent clauses, you're probably not going to need the comma. So we're going to move on to the next step in the video, which is, well, what is a coordinating conjunction and what does a comma use of that look like?